Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Finch from Legally Yours. I'm sitting down again with Scott Simmons from Legal Balance. And in this session, we're talking all about business development, but in particular about how lawyers can handle objection handling. So let's get into it, Scott. What actually is objection handling?
Right. Okay. So I love this because we tend to fixate on this idea that objections are where clients just pull us apart, where they just go, well, I don't like that, and I don't need you here, and all this sort of, why would I use you? And we get so caught up in that idea that we go, actually, hold on a second, I don't want to deal with this at all. Actually, it's just another part of the conversation. So if you've gone through a conversation where you are learning about your client, you're understanding their needs, and they've talked to you about what it is they've got coming up, you'll start talking a bit about what you do and how you help. And they will then start asking questions. And some of those questions it's very easy to think to yourself, oh, this is uncomfortable. They're questioning me. No, they're in a buying mindset. They're looking to achieve a goal. And they need your help. They just want to understand a bit more. So you have to look at it as another part of the conversation. It's where you get to differentiate you and your firm from the competition that's out there. What's really kind of important, Karen, is that it is every lawyer's responsibility to educate their clients and differentiate themselves. Not just to differentiate themselves, but also actually to differentiate themselves, their firm, and why you charge. And the reason for that is that so the client can get a really good understanding of those differences and understand why working with you will get them the best results. So it really is about broadening out that conversation, making them understand why you are different and better.
Okay, so I hear two things. Okay, so the first thing is stop making, because I hear so many lawyers make assumptions before they've even started the conversation. So they've already made assumptions about the objections that the client's going to have before they've even started the conversation. So stop it. Because often clients will say, oh no, that I don't want to talk to that client because they can't afford me, or they won't really want my services, or no. So they're already in that mindset. Stop that. Then when it gets to a bit where you say where the client's actually asking you questions about your service, there's a different way of looking at it, because what I just heard you say then was that rather than looking at as them almost accusing you or trying to trip you up to sort of put you down, which is I think what a lot of lawyers think is what the client's trying to do. Instead, change your mindset to think this is the part of the conversation where I get to showcase my value, and I get to talk about what my firm does and how amazing it is, and really understanding it. So is that kind of what you're sort of what they've got to do? Is it the showcase type?
Yes, that is it, 100%.
Yeah.
This is the part where you get to do the talking.
Yeah.
So again, I train lawyers, and one of the things I train lawyers in is most of your conversation should be you asking questions and then you being quiet.
Yeah.
The objection handling section is where you get to do the talking and where you get to do the differentiating and where you get to tell your story, and where you get to show them how you can help them.
I love it. So give me an example. Can you give me an example of this?
Okay, so I've got a great story, actually. A friend of mine came round to my house a while ago. His daughter was buying her first property. It was a flat. So it's more complicated than when you're buying a house, because, it's leasehold and there are management companies and managing agents involved, and you're not just dealing with the seller. So they take longer to deal with. And if there are any problems with the title, that makes it take even longer. So a friend of mine comes around and he says to me, and he knows obviously that I used to practice law. He said, Scott, he goes, I don't know why. He goes, I'm having such problems with my daughter's law. He goes, I don't know why we even instructed them. He said, it's just been hassle after hassle, delay after delay. He said, and I feel like, honestly, I might as well have just done it myself. And I sat there for a moment and I thought, do you know what? I don't have any skin in this game. But I used to work it. I started out in residential conveyancing. So I know the things that he's talking about.
Yeah.
What he's talking about there are objections.
Yeah.
Things that he doesn't understand, questions that he's got. He's asking for answers. And I sat there, and honestly, Karen, this conversation took me no more than 5 minutes. And what I did was I started off by saying to him, this is the biggest investment your daughter is ever going to make. And it comes with a huge amount of risk. And I said, wouldn't you want to be sure that that risk is being absolutely minimized and the property that your daughter thinks she's getting is the property that she's getting? Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing about flats. And then I took him through the fact that actually, you're not just dealing with the local authority. There are other third parties that you are dealing with, and they don't care how long it takes because they get paid whether or not your transaction completes.
Yeah.
And I said, so the delays aren't your lawyer. They're coming from elsewhere. So, and in terms of, if there are title difficulties, they're going to take longer. But again, don't you want to make sure that they're resolved?
Yeah.
So we spoke for less than 5 minutes, and he looked at me and he said, yes, Scott. He says, when I go home, I'm probably going to need to give them a call. He says, because I got on the phone to the lawyer the other day and I gave them a bit of a mouthful. Yeah. And I said, yeah, because they're in, the workload is heavy enough as it is. Yeah. And so, but the funny thing about it was the conversation I had with my friend took me less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my friend understood the value of what it was that this lawyer was doing for his daughter.
Absolutely.
What we need to do as an industry is take just a couple of minutes, because it doesn't take long. We think it will, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Just take a couple of minutes with each client just to explain the value of what we do. Changes the relationship completely.
Absolutely. And what I love in that conversation is that, unfortunately, that lawyer had missed that opportunity to touch in and educate and inquire. And look, maybe as you're talking, maybe part of it is this billable units. And so sometimes I know lawyers are resistant to kind of picking up the phone and calling because, just to sort of say, hey, I don't really have any solid news for you, but this is what's happened in the process. And this is why I don't have anything for you, because, they don't, I guess sometimes they're reluctant maybe to invoice the client for those calls, or they're already thinking the client won't want them to do that. But also, I guess, clients sometimes stop calling, they'll say to their lawyer, please stop calling me unless you've got something to say, because, but that's a whole other different discussion about a billable, which we'll have to come to and talk about. So, but yeah, I mean, what a missed opportunity, because, even just to check in and educate them around that process. And your friend would have been sitting there saying, God, it's not my lawyer's fault, but did you know how complicated these processes are? And, it just would have had a completely different relationship. Now, I just want to talk to you, though, about the most common objection that I often hear, what lawyers assume that clients are going to say, and how do you handle this one? And that's way more than I expected in terms of when they tell them the price. So what's your recommendation of how lawyers deal with that type of objection when they're presented with it?
Okay, so I love this. This is, honestly, it's my favorite one, because what we do is we have this instant reaction. I've got the client this far. I don't want to lose them. Okay, I can drop it to this price. You've instantly created a problem for yourself. The client knows you can be negotiated with. And from there on in, Karen, that's what's going to happen. You are going to go through this dance of negotiating. And then you've got this problem, haven't you? All of a sudden, they've gone from being this client to being this, this happy client, to being this client that you're going to have to negotiate with. So then what happens? You've got the price that you want. You normally drop below it. So then you're not completely satisfied. The client feels happier because they've negotiated you down. So then what you start doing, you start going a little bit higher, than you would normally, just so that if you're going to drop it down, you don't lose as much money as you might have done. What kind of trust does that build? It's not good to do that.
No.
So the one thing I always say to my clients is you need to move away from price and focus on value. As we just talked about in that story, you're focusing on the value that you bring as the lawyer to the transaction. So it's important to think about and to tell your client what elements you include in that price. What makes you different? That's hugely important. Do you always have a second partner involved? So if you're away, there's always someone there to update you. Do you work closely with your tax team and get them to explain the tax implications? Do you use technology to speed up the process on your side? All of these things are really important to clients. But there's something that I learned a few years ago on a training course, which is, remember, this is an objection. This is they're asking questions. What you want to do is almost you want to put it back on them to explain. And one of the things that I learned on this training course that I now teach my clients is when a client says to you, "Oh, that's more than I expected," or "Oh, that's really expensive," the instant response is, "Really? Because I don't hear that very often. Why do you think that?" And then you sit there.
I love that.
And you're asking them, firstly, you're saying to them, "Well, most clients are pretty happy with the price that I charge." And secondly, you're asking them for an explanation. Is this a real objection or is it just a negotiating tactic? So I really love that. And I learned that. And the success rate that clients have with it is actually higher than you expect.
Say it again for me.
Really? Because I don't hear that one very often. What is it that makes you think that? It's good, isn't it? It's really good.
It is gold because, like you say, it will become very, very apparent then if the client is actually trying to negotiate you down, and that's all it was, because they can come back with and say, I guess not. Or, they're going to have to now justify why they're almost a cheapskate, I guess, and everyone else is paying that. So what? Is it not as valuable for them? Do they not really want the service? Absolutely gold, Scott. I love it.
And the other one is to remember that you should be saying to them that, based on the remit that you have given me, all of our clients pay this price. And if I drop my price for you, it's not fair on the clients that I charge for this remit. Now, what we can do is we can take a look at the remit. If there are things on there that you don't want, we can change the remit and drop the price. Or we can do everything that's in the remit and you can pay the full price.
Yeah.
And then you end on that all-important thing is, which would you like to do? Again, you're ending on a question. So you are asking the client to speak next.
Yeah.
But most importantly, it shows that you value your work.
Yes. And you're standing by the value that you're providing too, which you've already set up in those wonderfully rich conversations where you've been listening, you've been gathering the need, you've been curious about why, how much this legal transaction might mean to them, how important it is. Yes. You've done all of that. Yeah. So, absolutely, gold. Well, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about closing, which is then the kind of the final thing, because how do you close it off, like you say, with a question and get them but set the time frame, I'm assuming, so that you're the one in control of the next point of contact. We'll come back and talk about that.
Absolutely.
Scott Simmons, Legal Balance. Karen Finch, legalyours.com.au. Catch us on Fight Club for Lawyers on Clubhouse too. Scott, see you soon.
See you soon.